Want to avoid pitfalls that lead to turnover? Hear 5 anonymous interviews with top performers that led to their quitting and what could have been done to keep them engaged. Hey there, I'm Krista Vance, entrepreneur and operations leader.
And I'm Matt Vance, award-winning author and social innovation researcher. We're your hosts of the Culture Profit Podcast.
Your place for purposeful company culture strategy.
Learn from HR pros, executives, and thought leaders how to prioritize profits by prioritizing people.
This episode is sponsored by Mobrium, the best friend of forward-thinking HR leaders, helping you strengthen your employer reputation as a reflection of your real culture.
Learn more at mobrium.com. Did you know that SHRM estimates the average cost of replacing an employee to be $4,700? That means it's very expensive when team members leave, especially top talent.
Today we have a special interview with 5 top performers. These episodes are pre-recorded, compiled interviews. You'll notice that I'm not part of any of them. Matt is doing the interviews for this round, but we wanted to talk about our insights that we gained from these.
So you're going to hear from an anonymous cat in the performing services industry, an anonymous robot, not a humanoid robot, but a person using a robot animation for anonymity in the manufacturing industry. We've got a smiley face being interviewed in the nonprofit sector, a cactus from the financial services, and a bunny in the media industry.
The bunny's so cute.
Definitely.
Well, we're so excited to share with you what they had to say and hope you enjoy.
All right, everyone. Our interview is with an anonymous cat. This was a manager from a professional services company with approximately 250 employees. So, first question, why did you quit this job?
I think, Matt, there were a few reasons that I quit, but a big contributing factor was promises that weren't delivered on. So I was made promises that I was going to be a director in this organization, and they promoted my colleague, who was also my friend, to be my manager and take that director position. But they didn't actually communicate that to me at all. So they promised me the role. They promoted someone else into that role who was my friend and who later became my manager because of that promotion. And they didn't communicate that with me at all.
That makes sense. So expectation management sounds like a big issue there.
Yeah, absolutely. Very poor leadership overall.
And could the company have done anything differently, or what do you think they should have done?
I think the way the whole thing was handled was quite poor. So what they could have done was communicate with me effectively. As you mentioned earlier about expectations, they could have managed my expectations better in terms of where I was going within that organization. Because once my friend was promoted to be my manager, I didn't see another way for me to progress in that organization if he was there blocking that move essentially. And I think for me overall, the leadership, there was such a lack of transparency in how decisions were made. There was a very toxic culture, very misogynistic at the senior levels. So I loved everything about my job. I loved the people that I worked with, but the leadership. So if they had addressed some of those really toxic, lack of transparency, lack of accountability, lack of recognition at those senior levels, I think that could be something that they could have done to encourage me to stay.
Okay. So I'm just going to kind of play off of this a little bit. Let's say that after this decision was done, that other individual was put in that leadership role. You came forward and said, hey, I'm not very satisfied with this. And they said, how about we just give you a raise and you stay where you're at? Whatever that number is, would that have fixed it?
No.
Okay.
I was on very good money. I asked for more than I thought I deserved, to be perfectly honest.
Okay.
And they gave me even more. They offered me even more. And I knew that this new manager of mine was earning less than I was, even with the promotion. I did inquire about, what does this mean? And I was told in no uncertain terms that actually this promotion means that he's more your supervisor. He's not really your manager. And if you want mentoring support or advice, then you need to go to his manager, which of course reinforces the really poor decision that they made, because why would I be reporting into someone who was essentially at the same level as me? So that's a long way of answering your question, but no, I wouldn't have stayed for more money.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your perspective. I think that's super valuable, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, Matt.
All right, everyone. Our next interview is with a VP who left a manufacturing startup. So we're welcoming him. And yeah, so tell us why you quit your job. Why did you leave this manufacturing startup?
The biggest reason I left is I didn't feel like I had alignment with the executive team. And so what that looks like is they were making decisions with finances. Our goal, what I thought was our goal at the beginning, was expansion and growth. But they were pulling out a lot of money for dividends and for bonuses and all of these things. And so it peeved me, where I was like, hey, let's grow, let's expand, and that isn't what I felt like was the executive's vision, even though at first that's what we all agreed upon, that's what we said we wanted to do. But as time went on, that didn't seem to be the case with their actions.
Interesting. So were you a part of that bonus structure, or was it only like a few different people, or did it feel
Yeah,
like
I mean,
equitable?
I got a normal end of the year bonus. I wouldn't say it was a large bonus, but the founding executive team, who didn't put any money into the company, they were just essentially gifted equity. They were given some kind of dividend payout, and then some people were given substantial raises. From what I gather, it's close to $50,000, which we couldn't afford to give our guys raises. And so it's like, why are bigwigs getting dividends and boss men getting big raises when we're not giving $1 to any of our line workers who are working overtime, who work really hard, who probably need the money more than we do, right? So that didn't sit well with me.
Interesting. Kind of digging in that a little bit more, did you feel like you were compensated in a good way? Like, did you feel happy with your own compensation?
Yeah, I did. We had probably 3 guys on my same level. And I felt like if we were going to make cuts anywhere, it was in that group. Obviously, we weren't giving raises to anybody else, but it was like, if you're looking at it from like a unbiased perspective on paper, it's like our management bucket was our fattest bucket, and for the size of company, it wasn't right sized correctly. And so I offloaded myself, if you want to say that. And when I left, I said, hey, give these 3 guys raises and give these guys the bonuses they never got. And that's what they ended up doing after I left, which I felt good about. But it's just unfortunate that it had to, we couldn't support the whole team. And I felt the best thing to do was to offload my own salary. So
Interesting. So, what do you think the company should have done differently, or what would have made you excited to stay?
Yeah, I don't know why the executives were getting dividends at all. We were too young. We were only 2 or 3 years old, and not profitable. We were breaking even, I would say. So not only were we not growth minded, keeping that money inside the company, but it's just like the bigwigs wanted to pull out money as quickly as possible. They wanted, cash flow towards their own bank account. And If we had maybe changed that a little bit, I do think I would have been more likely to stay. There were some other factors too, but just how the upper management talked about the ground level employees, the words they used, how they treated them, what they expected of them. And so even if the compensation piece was handled properly, I still don't know if I would have stayed because there was other business ethics or moral issues that I just didn't sit well with me.
That makes sense. And thank you for sharing. We appreciate your input today.
Yep, totally.
For our next interview, we have a director sharing some experiences from two different companies, a nonprofit and a startup. So first up, why did you quit your first job? Let's talk about the nonprofit. Why did you quit the nonprofit job?
Okay, thanks, Matt. That sounds great. So the reason I quit the first nonprofit, unethical management. The management was undermining the directors in the company to the point that it was creating negativity behind the scenes that the directors then had to go back and clean up. We were in the business of people, so per se, and to have that kind of an influence was just no longer something that I could tolerate.
Okay, yeah, the negativity can be a huge impact. So what could have been done differently?
So one of the things that could have been done differently would be for the CEO and the heads of the company to take into consideration the things that the directors were saying. Mine was not an isolated case. It was multiple directors in the company that were going to the management or the CEO, discussing the issues that were arising. Unfortunately, those issues were not taken seriously.
So using feedback, critically important. When it's not, that can erode trust. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it did definitely erode the trust, but also it eroded I don't know what word I'm looking for here, but the knowledge that you could continue with that company in a safe space.
That makes sense. Yeah, and that's critically important. Everyone is thinking about how they can go forward, and if you feel like that's capped or cut off because of not having that psychological safety and trust, that's huge. So let's talk about the second company. Why did you quit the startup?
So there were quite a few reasons I actually quit the startup. I love the company. It was fantastic. I love startups because there's such an energy there that just it blossoms. You can combine learning with youthfulness, because a lot of startups are by the younger generations, and I really love their energy that they give. There's just a lot of excitement. So that being said, with that, there's also a lot of learning that comes from the CEOs of those companies. A few of the items are not necessarily that bad, but they were just things that I didn't need to continue with it. Being the head of the position in that company, there was no more opportunities for growth technically, unless I was going to take over the company, of course. But I was to the point where it's a small company, so we were the heads. There were no vice presidents. There was not a board of directors. And the CEO was not willing to take any advice from specialists about how to set up the business, which was part of my position as well, setting up the business for long-term success.
Very interesting. Yeah, I feel like if you're in a large 10,000 plus company, you can see growth in various different directions for, career expansion, whether it's specializing more in a certain skill set or people leadership. But that startup, it's just not really in the nature of the organization. So that can be tricky. And then paired with maybe an unwillingness to take some feedback on different ways to do things can be difficult. Would you be more or less willing to share feedback in an anonymous review because of these experiences?
I would share feedback anonymously, yes, but I also would share some positive feedback for both companies at the same time, because just because I resigned from the company for my own personal reasons doesn't always mean that they deserve a hit in a negative manner. If I've seen that maybe they have changed a few things, I don't know, but yes, I would share feedback.
Okay.
I wouldn't word it extremely negative that it would damage the company, though.
I like that. Yeah, you're a good person. Thanks
Yeah.
for taking the time to share here as well. We really appreciate that. Okay, next up, we're talking with an anonymous cactus here who worked in the financial services industry at a company with over 200,000 employees, and he was a manager at the time. So we had chatted a little bit before recording this, and so go ahead and tell us, you tried to quit. Why did you try to quit your job at this company?
Yeah. There were a number of reasons why I tried to quit, and prefacing to I am in the process of quitting. It's just a lot different than I initially expected. I spent a good amount of time coming to the decision of, hey, I'm gonna ultimately transition my career. But when it all came up, it was rather sudden. I went from pouring my heart and soul into what felt like was going to be a 30+ year career to suddenly feeling like looking at just the long term and not being excited anymore. And because it was so sudden, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just a passing fad, because it took me a long time to get there. So in time and a good amount of thinking, I came to recognize that, yeah, this new thought that I've been entertaining was one I wanted to act upon. And the big reason being, there's in the financial services world I work within, you operate on a small team within a larger organization. And the small team that I'm a part of, and this is highlighting why also I tried to quit, and it ended up being something that I would have never even imagined as a scenario, but we'll get to that eventually. The small team I work with, unbelievable. And a lot of the people I work with directly, they're great. But the larger organization has gotten to its size, and it no longer wants to take risks. It's very calculated. There's a whole lot of no's that are being said. And I started to notice this risk aversion permeating the people around me and myself too, beyond just the day-to-day work environment. I was feeling it outside, and it reminded me a lot of the phrase, you are a product of the 5 people that you spend the most time around. And the more I thought about it, I realized that a company culture is very easily one of those 5 people, because you're spending your time around a lot of different people, but they all are getting instructions from an overarching entity. So I was seeing that permeate the people around me, ultimately into me, and recognizing that that overall risk aversion wasn't how I wanted to approach my life long term. And it really got me thinking about how I can explore my creative side, how I could venture into a new realm of thinking. Now, that's why I went down this path, ultimately ended up getting an offer that worked out really well with a business that I'm going to be starting, where I'd have the opportunity to be part-time for kind of at my leisure. So it ended up working out fantastically. And that's really just a testament to the direct team I work with and their want for the best for me in pretty much all scenarios. But that's the overarching reason that drove all of this and kind of where I am today.
Okay. So it sounds like, you're really close to your immediate team, and you had let them know that you wanted to leave. And was it their idea to let you work part-time as kind of this transitionary time frame, or kind of how did that come about?
Yeah, it was their idea, because I just never expected it as an option. I went into the conversation I had with them with the mindset of, today could be my last day. It could be 2 weeks. it could be 2 months. I gave them a 2-month framework just based on an event that I had coming up down the line. And I didn't want to go in with the mindset of like, hey, let's look at part-time, because they were really looking at me as a key integral player that was going to be a managing partner on the team in the not too distant future, directing a lot more than just my managerial responsibilities were entitled at this given time. So I was getting groomed more and more to take on a partnership role. So I didn't expect them to also want me so intently for the facilitation and processes that I'm directly involved with our clients.
Makes sense. Well, that's amazing that, you didn't even envision this scenario. You were expecting potentially it was your last day and they paved a path that ended up benefiting your lead into the entrepreneurial world, which I think is amazing to have that part-time path. I think, talking with some of the other interviewees about this, none of them have had this kind of scenario play out where you go to quit and you expect that you're just going to leave and go do your own thing, but then the company comes back with this kind of in between that ends up being better for both parties.
Yeah.
How does this change your perception of the company in the long run?
In the long run, I mean, I think I haven't thought about it as much in the perception of the company. I've thought about it more in the perception of that oftentimes the worst case is seldom the most likely.
Hmm.
I mean, as it comes to the company as a whole, though, because outside of our team directly, some other people that are involved with like kind of just how our business is set up is we run our own practices, and then we still have some other reports. And everyone that I've reported to directly outside of our individual team is fully supportive. Obviously, sad to know that I'm on my way out, but I think it does speak to the fact that I do work with really good people. Um, and even though I don't agree with the risk off mindset, the company as a whole does care about their employees. And it's beyond just the individual team. They really do care. So I guess in hindsight, I would remember that. I've seen bad reviews on different sites about the company I work at, and I hadn't been fully aligned with some of what they had said, but I guess it more emphasizes that the people you work with directly really have such a big influence on the outcome of your career, more so even than just, especially at a large company, more so even than the company itself.
Wow, that's powerful. Well, thank you for taking a few minutes to share your story with us, and yeah, have an awesome rest of your day.
Appreciate that, Matt. You too.
For the next interview, we're talking with an anonymous bunny who worked in the media industry at a company with a few hundred employees. She was a manager at the time, and let's hear directly from her. So, why did you quit your job?
Yeah, so I quit my job because I was hired to do specific things, and there was a team that really didn't know what they were doing. So they brought me in as the expert. And so there were certain things that I recommended, and then I was told not to do them, that I was asking too much of the team. And then they would come back, they would get in trouble. My supervisors would get in trouble. And then they would come back and they would be mad at me because I didn't implement the stuff they told me not to implement. So, and then when they finally got everything going and it was looking really good, they took credit for everything that I did.
That doesn't feel very good.
No, it was a
Oh,
very frustrating process.
I can imagine. So, was this kind of a one-time occurrence, or was it kind of a pattern that you had observed over a while?
I would say it happened about every 2 to 3 weeks for about a year and a half.
Oh, wow. So,
Mhm.
what was kind of the breaking point that made you want to finally leave?
I would say the breaking point was that when I had taken the team like our group, they had previously been negative as far as profit. And I had like taken that number and times 5 into profit. And then they put me on a PIP.
What on earth?
I
Okay,
was
that's interesting.
super frustrated. They said things like, I don't have enough, I'm not managing enough people. I'm not writing emails the way that they wanted, which only occurred like the first 2 weeks I was there. Different really weird things.
Wow.
hmm
So do you think there was anything that could have changed to make you be excited about staying, or did you feel like it was a lost cause for you and you needed to just move on?
I feel like if I'd been given credit for the amazing changes that I created for the group, and if I had been allowed to implement the changes when I recommended them, that would have been huge for me. But I think when it got down to the end and I was just completely fed up with everything, that it was a lost cause at that point, because I felt like my leadership wasn't going to change. And even if it changed for a couple of weeks, it would just go back to where it was.
That makes sense. So I guess the last question is, are you enjoying your new job now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Every job has challenges, right? And there's opportunities to learn and things to struggle through. That's not the issue. I would say that here I have amazing leadership. They listen to me. They love the changes that I'm making, and they've gone to bat for me against other teams that are resistant to that. And it's been wonderful. So huge difference. I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. Well, thanks for taking a little time to chat with us. Have an awesome weekend.
Thank you.
We hope you were able to gain your own insights from today's episode. And we wanted to share with you some insights that we had from listening to these interviews. So, first off, the cat with some professional services, she experienced unmet expectations. She was told that she would get a promotion, and then she didn't end up getting it. So they didn't manage the expectations well there. And even though she was making more money than the person who got the promotion, she said that that would not have helped her want to stay.
And I would just add, like from some of the research I've done in my book, The Review Cycle, managing expectations leads to, at least on a consumer level, it leads to greater intent to spend and greater intent to rate higher, like from on a 5-star scale. So I would say that same principle of being willing to do more applies to the employee engagement use case. When expectations are managed properly, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to change a program, change an offering, change something, but say what you're actually going to do and then do that thing. That's really important.
Better to not get people disappointed, to let them know exactly what they're getting, right? Thanks, Matt. And then on to our robot in the manufacturing sector. So he experienced a lack of alignment. He felt that the values that the company were stating they had was that they wanted growth and expansion, but then the leadership was spending more on their bonuses and their own dividends. So treatment of employees wasn't the best. He noticed them saying things about the ground level employees that just didn't sit right with him, overworking, not giving raises to those ground level employees and not referring to them in uplifting ways. And for him, he just realized that those things wouldn't change. And so he had to leave.
And I would just add to that, like in the book Work Inspired by Aaron Ian, if you haven't read it, it's one of my absolute favorite books about company culture. He talks about leaders having almost a superpower of people remember even small interactions with leaders because of your position of influence. And so you have to recognize that if you're a leader, you're a people leader, you're always on stage. Everyone's observing how you interact, what you say, what you don't say, what you do, what you don't do. to other people, and that can influence their perceptions of you. So it is important to treat everyone equally. It should go without saying for sure. The next interview we had was with anonymous Miss Smiley Face from the nonprofit company, and she experienced a toxic manager. Psychological safety is critical to maintain a positive work environment where you are able to unlock that level of discretionary effort where people are willing to go above and beyond a defined job description. If you want to unlock that level of creativity, that level of loyalty and commitment, you have to be kind. You have to think about what's best for your team members in order for them to have that same level of care to you. I mean, it is a working relationship that's being managed or not managed in some cases.
And I would add to that when issues arise, leadership needs to address those fully, not hear something and let it go, because those issues can continue, and then the turnover happens when it's not resolved.
Totally agree with that, Krista. And then we had the anonymous cactus from the financial services industry. So one thing that he had mentioned was a desire to have more creativity and do certain things that were aligned with his career goals and passions. And that wasn't necessarily possible in such a large organization, but it was the individuals, the people that he worked with, peers and managers, that allowed him to find this kind of middle ground opportunity to work on his own business and continue working for the organization part-time instead of just exiting right away. And that not only did that preserve some work productivity for the company from him in that kind of offloading time frame, but also it ensured that he had a much more positive sentiment of the company after he left. And I absolutely loved, I just want to point out this one thing that he said, it's the people, not the company, that shape your career. That was definitely a theme that I noticed throughout the interviews, is that we're talking about people to people interactions. Most of the things that were mentioned, both positive and negative, had to do with people, not a policy and a handbook represented from the non-human company entity. Most things were about the actual people that were involved. So,
and on to the cute little bunny in the media space. So she experienced this, that she was hired as an expert and then ended up not being listened to. So she was the one that was supposed to help fix things, and then whatever she tried to implement, they didn't want to do. She encountered a lot of resistance with that. Then once she finally was able to get the things through that she intended, she got no credit for it and even got put on a PIP, which I hadn't heard of before this. So, which
personal improvement plan.
Thank
That's
you.
what that
Thank
is.
you,
So
Matt.
it's like the plan before you get fired, right? So she turned the media space for this company, the advertising efforts, from a loss to an exceptional positive, and then had that happen, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. And so I hope that from all these top talent interviews that we had, that you're able to maybe you're one that has related to these experiences. I think these really do encompass a lot of what people face when they go to jobs, and it's all about the people, the leaders, the interactions that you have, the communication. And so I think these are very widespread issues that can happen. And so we hope you enjoyed and were able to take away your own insights from it. Thank you for listening. Make sure to follow us and stay tuned for future episodes.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Culture Profit podcast, and for being a part of our journey to prove that putting people first is best for business.
Today's episode was sponsored by Mobrium.
Want to get more employee reviews and streamline your employer reputation? Visit mobrium.com.
Now go find one way to prioritize your people and watch your profits grow.